Okay, thank you. Now, in our previous lecture, we had talked about Balban, and he was the last important ruler of the Elbari dynasty. Next, we need to talk about the Khilji dynasty. Among the Khiljis, the most prominent ruler was Alauddin Khilji. Some important developments took place during his reign. First of all, he came up with an entirely new theory of kingship that was partly a continuation of Balban's theory of kingship and partly a departure from it. So there was some continuity and change. He also initiated a series of wide-ranging reforms, including administrative reforms, military reforms, revenue reforms, and market reforms. Further, due to several reasons, the Khilji period in the history of the Sultanate is also known as the Khilji Revolution. So we need to see how the replacement of the Elbari dynasty with the Khilji dynasty brought about an important revolution in the history of the Sultanate. ठीक है? सबसे पहले इनफैक्ट इसी क्वेश्चन को एड्रेस करने की कोशिश करते हैं. Who was the founder of the Khilji dynasty? Jalaluddin Khilji. Before he came to power, he was a prominent military commander, but he was not of Turkish origin. Rather, he was of Afghan background. So, although the Khiljis were originally Turks, they had settled in the region of Afghanistan. So, they had become Afghanized, right? And their contemporaries looked at the Khiljis as Afghans rather than Turks. Now, batao, under the theory of kingship that Balban had put forward, would any Afghan have the opportunity to rise to a high office such as Sultan? बड़े ऑफिस के लिए ये लोग एलिजिबल होंगे या नहीं होंगे? नहीं होंगे. क्यों? क्योंकि रेसिस्ट पॉलिसी फॉलो कर रहा था, रेशियल एक्सक्लूसिविज्म that was distorted in favor of the Turks. So the Khiljis were outsiders when it came to the power structure within the Delhi Sultanate. However, Jalaluddin Khilji had the support of the military. The military had been strengthened considerably during the reign of Balban, and therefore his power had also increased, right? The chaos that followed Balban's reign was a major opportunity for the Khiljis. Using the support of the military, they were able to come to power. And the replacement of the Elbari dynasty, which was Turkish, with the Khilji dynasty, which was of Afghan background, that was a revolutionary development. Okay? So, first of all, the Khilji Revolution. Write down. It refers to the wider changes. It refers to the wider changes and social importance, sorry, not social, social and political importance of the dynastic change in the Delhi Sultanate from the Ilbari Turks to the Khiljis. Full stop. It brought about a major transformation in the nature of the state, comma, the social composition of the political class, and the pattern of interaction with other powers surrounding the Sultanate. Next point. Although the Khiljis were of Turkish origin, comma, they were associated with the Khalaj region in modern Afghanistan. Full stop. Therefore, comma, they were identified more as Turks rather than, sorry, more as Afghans rather than Turks. Next point. Due to the policy of Turkish racial exclusivism, adopted by Balban, comma, the Khiljis remained outsiders to the political process. Next point. As a result, comma, the establishment of the Khilji dynasty was revolutionary since it represented the end of Balban's policy of racism and Turkish racial superiority and Turkish racial superiority. Okay, so this is one reason why it was revolutionary. Next point likho. The policy of racism was replaced by the practice of meritocracy. By the practice of meritocracy. So now are the Khilji is going to promote their officials from only a small group of Turks or an extremely diverse group? क्या होगा? Diverse group, तो whoever is most capable, they will be given the opportunity, they will be promoted. Sub point लिखो. The Khiljis began to elevate, elevate, elevate hitherto outsiders, hitherto, HIDTHERTO, outsiders from various backgrounds, including Afghans, Persians, and even Indian Muslims. Okay? What is going to be the result? Is the social base going to remain narrow or is it going to widen now? It is going to become wider. So write down. Sub point. This significantly widened the social base of the empire. The social base of the empire. ठीक है? Next main point लिखो. Instead of relying on the support of the ulema, or the nobility, how had the Khiljis come to power? कैसे आए थे? जलालुद्दीन खिलजी ने कैसे लास्ट इल्बरी रूलर को डिपोज किया था? Through a series of military victories, right? The Khiljis had come to power. The Khiljis had come to power on the basis of their military strength, of their military strength. Full stop. Subpoint. Now, was this the same as the policy which had been adopted by Balban? Yes, he did have a strong military, but he also enrobed the support of a section of the ulema class, and his policy of Turkish racial exclusivism also secured him the support of the Turkish nobility. Okay, write down. This was a major deviation from the established practice. Now, if the Khiljis are not dependent upon the support of the ulemas or the support of the nobles, will they have to share power with them? No. तो ऐसे में strongest institution कौन बनेगा? The sultan, the crown, right? And that arrangement is known as despotism. ठीक है? So write down. This in the same subpoint. This prepared the stage for unprecedented levels of royal despotism. Okay? So till now there used to exist a tenuous balance of power between the sultan, the nobility, and the ulema. Now that was completely disrupted. The sultan had completely imposed his supremacy upon the other institutions. Okay? Subpoint likho. This allowed the Khiljis to entirely disrupt the balance of power at the center. The balance of power at the center. ठीक है? Now, since the Khiljis are not dependent upon the ulemas for legitimizing their rule, will they have to follow a strictly religious political policy, or can they follow a secular policy? They can be more secular. Since they are not dependent, they can exclude the ulema from the power structure. Write down. Next main point. The Khilji period is also notable for its secularism. Subpoint. The Khiljis excluded the ulemas from politics in an effective manner. Since they did not depend upon the ulemas for legitimacy. ठीक है? Now, What had Balban done in order to justify his accession to the throne? What was his claim to the throne? Biggest claim क्या था? That he was the choice of God himself, that he enjoyed niyabat-e khudai, that he was the Zilullah. Now, since the Khiljis have dissociated them from religion and they have come to power on the basis of military strength, are they also going to emphasize upon the principle of divine origin of kingship? वो कंटिन्यू करेंगे, उसको डिस्कार्ड कर देंगे? अब डिस्कार्ड कर देंगे क्योंकि उसकी जरूरत नहीं है. They have come to power on the basis of their military strength. So principle of divine origin of kingship is now going to be replaced by the principle of military strength, principle of strength. Write down. Next main point. The Khiljis were also successful in dissociating the institution of kingship from God. Subpoint. Unlike Balban, who claimed to be chosen by God, comma, the Khiljis justified their crown on the basis of strength. ठीक है? So if somebody had to challenge the authority of Balban only on the grounds of religion, they could have done this. They could have challenged this idea that Balban was not the actual choice of God. This is an untruth, right? लेकिन खिलजीज को अगर चैलेंज करना होगा तो क्या करना होगा? You will need material resources, real power in order to displace them, because Alauddin Khilji believed that the crown is justification in itself. Crown केवल ऊपर वाले को responsible answerable है. He is not answerable to any man, either a prince or a priest. ठीक है? तो since the king is not answerable to any mortal being, if somebody wants to challenge him, it has to be on the basis of material factors. तो आर पार की लड़ाई होगी, वो फैसला करेगा. You want to challenge me? Come and meet me on the battleground. This was the new ideology, the principle of strength. ठीक है? Next main point लिखो. Unlike the relatively conservative external policy of the previous period, comma, the Khiljis adopted an aggressive policy of imperialism. ठीक है? तो during the first phase, although North India was under the control of Delhi, they did not make any serious attempt, or they did not make any attempt at all to expand their empire beyond North India. But that changed under Alauddin Khilji. ठीक है. So this was another major departure, another revolutionary development as compared to the previous period. Okay, next main point लिखो. The Khilji Revolution. The Khilji Revolution also manifested itself in the field of political, military, and administrative restructuring. Subpoint. This completely transformed the nature of the state and the role it played in contemporary life. A role it played in contemporary life. So the Khiljis were also institution builders. They introduced a number of new institutions and policies which completely changed the nature of the interaction between the state and the common people, the subjects, which completely transformed the goals and objectives of the state, the functions that the state performed, and hence it was revolutionary. Next main point likho. However, the Khilji Revolution was not without limitations. Was not without limitations. Subpoint. The revolutionary developments were largely confined to which area? Political or social or economic? No, largely political and military, were largely confined to the political realm. So are political changes at the center going to affect the lives of the common people in a major way? नहीं होगा. So write down. Therefore, it had little impact on the lives of the common people. So Khilji Revolution needs to be reassessed. It should not be seen as a revolution of commoners against the power structure, against the elites. Rather, it should be seen as the revolt of the military elite, which had been strengthened due to the intense militarization during Babylon's reign, against the established aristocratic Turkish elite. Okay? So write down subpoint. The Khilji Revolution therefore needs to be reassessed. full stop. Rather than representing a popular revolt, against the elites, comma, it was a revolt of the military elite, against the racially exclusive Turkish aristocracy and crown. ठीक है. Now, while the social base of the empire was broadened due to the inclusion of various new ethnicities and groups, the social base still remained quite limited. India, Hindu majority country और Muslim majority country. Hindu majority country, उस समय तो proportion और भी ज्यादा था. And while the Khiljis had incorporated different classes of Muslims into the power structure, they had made no attempt to include Hindus in the power structure. Therefore, although the social base had widened, it had widened marginally, not in a revolutionary manner. Okay? That is going to happen later on during the Mughal period. Write down. Subpoint. The Khiljis did manage to expand the social base of the empire, comma, this expansion was marginal. Full stop. Continue in the same subpoint. While new classes of Muslims were given greater opportunities comma, there was no representation of Hindus who formed the bulk of the population. ठीक है, तो एक ये दूसरा लिमिटेशन हो गया. पहला लिमिटेशन क्या था? that it was not a popular revolution, rather it was a military elite revolt against the traditional racially exclusivist Turkish nobility and Turkish crown. ठीक है. दूसरा लिमिटेशन क्या है? सोशल बेस हैड बीन वाइडेंड बट नॉट वाइडेंड सफिशिएंटली टू मेक इट ट्रूली प्लूरलिस्टिक. ठीक है. नेक्स्ट सब पॉइंट नंबर 3. तीसरा. दो चीजें देखी ना हमने. हाँ, पॉलिटिकल रेल्म तो सोशियो इकोनॉमिक रेल्म. हाँ ठीक है. तीसरा, ये फोर्थ वाला लिखो. The Khilji Revolution did manage to transform the nature of the Delhi Sultanate. to transform the nature of the Delhi Sultanate. बट ये चेंज जो आया किस डायरेक्शन में आया? Did the lives of the common people in the Sultanate improve because of these changes, or did conditions become even harsher? Did despotism and militarism increase, or did they decline? Did the freedom of the people increase, or did it decline? Did the burden of taxation increase, or did it decline? क्या हुआ? टैक्सेशन भी बढ़ जाएगा, फ्रीडम भी घट जाएगा, डिस्पोटिज्म भी बढ़ जाएगा, मिलिटरिज्म भी बढ़ जाएगा. So the exploitative machinery which the state represented, that became more efficient in its exploitative potential rather than less efficient. ठीक है? So on the whole, these changes were not in the interest of the general population. They may have been the interests of the Sultan, but general conditions worsened as a result of the Khilji Revolution. That is why इसको revolutionary बोलना बहुत ज्यादा accurate नहीं माना जाता है. ठीक है? लिखो. What is the last line that you have written? Delhi Sultanate. However, however, this change was not necessarily beneficial for the general public. Beneficial for the general public. Full stop. In the same subpoint, continue. While despotism, militarism, and the burden of taxation increased, greater restrictions were placed on the behavior of the common people. On the behavior of the common people. Full stop. The Khilji state represented a totalitarian military dictatorship. Khilji state represented a totalitarian military dictatorship. Totalitarian. Military dictatorship. Totalitarian government क्या होता है? Where one man sets all the rules, one man serves all the justice, one man takes all the decisions. So it is a one-man dictatorship, a totalitarian military dictatorship. ठीक है? Next main point लिखो. Due to these limitations, the validity of the term Khilji Revolution within inverted commas. Khilji Revolution is diminished. diminished. Full stop. At the same time, comma, it cannot be denied that the Khilji period represented an entirely new chapter. In the history of the Sultanate period. With many revolutionary aspects. ठीक है, ये हो गया the Khilji Revolution. Take down a question. Was the Khilji Revolution a revolution in reality? 200 words, 15 marks. बताइए, will you be able to address this? Revolution था या नहीं था? In some respects it was, but in other respects it was not so revolutionary. तो revolutionary aspects थे, but there were some limitations to this revolution. तो जो अभी हमने डिस्कस किया है वही बताना है यहाँ पर. Now, founder of the Khilji dynasty, Jalaluddin Khilji. What was his relationship to Alauddin Khilji? Alauddin Khilji was the nephew as well as the son-in-law of Jalaluddin Khilji. Now, Jalaluddin Khilji was already quite old when he became the Sultan. He was roughly 70 years at the time of his death. Okay? Alauddin Khilji was the heir apparent, the successor of Jalaluddin Khilji as well. Okay? He had been given lofty offices within the state by Jalaluddin Khilji. For example, he had been made the commander or the you can say head of the military department, the Ariz-e-Mumalik. He had also been made the master of ceremonies, the Amir-e-Tuzuk at the royal court. He was kept quite close by Jalaluddin Khilji. Jalaluddin Khilji also showed a great degree of favor to him. He gave him very generous gifts. Alauddin Khilji was also given the opportunity to shine in the military sense. He was sent on major campaigns where he was able to cover himself in glory. He was given the opportunity to wage military campaigns. Now, this was extremely important since the Khiljis had come to power on the basis of the military strength. Recognition and acceptance by the military was a very important attribute for the Sultan to have. If the military did not accept and respect the Sultan's reign is going to be a weak one and ineffective one. So Jalaluddin Khilji was essentially preparing Alauddin Khilji for the next phase for his reign as Sultan. Okay? However, Alauddin Khilji was a little bit impatient, and finally hua kya? He began to criticize Jalaluddin Khilji behind the scenes. He started to hatch a conspiracy with some of the important military commanders against the Sultan, right? He also started to criticize the Sultan as being weak and unfit. Now, Jalaluddin Khilji had made two important mistakes. First of all, he had adopted the policy of, you can say, pluralism. Okay? Now, Balban had introduced the policy of Turkish racial exclusivism, and the Khiljis were known for their racial equality, right? So he had opened the doors of the state to each and every section of the population, including not only Muslims of all classes, but even Hindus. So Hindus had started to be introduced or involved in administration. Now, this was seen as a sign of weakness by some of the orthodox elements within the Muslim elite classes, both within the nobility as well as the military. So this was seen as a sign of weakness, that he is pandering to the Hindus. He is not a true Muslim ruler. Secondly, Jalaluddin Khilji felt that Balban's reign, although it was quite effective, was also quite disastrous. His policy of excessive despotism, the policy of blood and iron against rebels, was destructive. Rather than suppressing the rebellions, eliminating them completely, it would be better to gain their trust and support. Therefore, he followed a policy of amnesty. Towards the rebels. One of Balban's nephews, Malik Chhajju, rebelled against Jalaluddin. ठीक है? अब बलबन के अगेंस्ट कोई rebellion करता तो क्या होता उसके साथ? They would have been put to death for sure. But Malik Chhajju was restored. He was forgiven completely. ठीक है? He was the Sultan made attempts to bring him closer to the crown to gain his greater trust and support. Now, this was seen as a sign of weakness. Now, Malik Chhajju capitalized upon this and rebelled against the Sultan once again. अब बलबन एक बार तो चलो मान लो गलती से किसी को माफ भी कर देता, दूसरी बार किसी को माफ करता नहीं करता. In fact, not only Balban, no ruler would have done this. But once again, what did Jalaluddin Khilji do? He forgave him. Once again, he followed the policy of amnesty. Both of these were seen as signs of weakness. And as the notions of weakness of Jalaluddin Khilji became stronger, the star of Alauddin Khilji continued rising higher and higher. He became the favored choice of the military aristocracy. Now, what he needed to do was to secure the support of the military rank and file. And he got the opportunity to do this as well. In 1292 and 1296, he led victorious campaigns south of the Vindhyas at Vidisha or Bhilsa, and Devgiri. On both occasions, Alauddin Khilji was victorious and his soldiers returned with a large war booty. Okay? Now, instead of keeping all this loot to himself, he distributed it among his soldiers, thus winning even their sympathy, goodwill, and support. So now, the strongest pillar of royal authority, that is the military, किसके फेवर में है? इज इट इन फेवर ऑफ जलालुद्दीन खिलजी और इज इट इन फेवर ऑफ अलाउद्दीन? अब अलाउद्दीन के फेवर में है. देयरफॉर इट वाज नाउ पॉसिबल फॉर अलाउद्दीन टू assassinate Jalaluddin Khilji and declare himself as the new sultan. ठीक है? Give the heading Alauddin Khilji. Alauddin Khilji. Time period 1296 to 1316. हाँ, इसी ने मारा है, इसी ने असैसिनेट किया है. ठीक है? Alauddin Khilji was in fact returning from his victorious campaign, military campaign in Devgiri, and Jalaluddin Khilji had gone to Allahabad to welcome him. Kara, जहां था Kara near Allahabad, वहां पे एक फोर्ट था, to welcome him. Jalaluddin Khilji did not suspect any conspiracy against him, and narrative ये है that as Jalaluddin Khilji spread his arms to embrace Alauddin Khilji, he was completely defenseless. Alauddin Khilji ने अपने बेल्ट में खंजर छुपा रखा था, and जैसे उसने अपने हाथ स्प्रेड किए, वो पीछे से जाके मार दिया उसको. He died and Alauddin declared himself to be the new sultan. So write down Alauddin Khilji. Alauddin Khilji is often regarded as one of the strongest and most consequential figures in Sultanate history. In Sultanate history. Full stop. Next point. He was the nephew and son-in-law of Jalaluddin Khilji, comma, the founder of the Khilji dynasty. The founder of the Khilji dynasty. Next point. In fact, he had played an important role in the rise of Khilji power. In the rise of Khilji power. Next point. Jalaluddin favored Alauddin heavily. Favored Alauddin heavily. And treated him as the heir apparent, as the heir apparent. heir apparent का मतलब उत्तराधिकारी, ठीक है, as the heir apparent. Sub point, in fact, Alauddin had been given important positions such as Ariz-e-Mumalik, within brackets, head of the military department, and Amir-e-Tuzuk, within brackets, master of ceremonies. Next main point. Next main point. It was clear that Alauddin was being groomed for the position of Sultan. Was being groomed for the position of Sultan. Full stop. However, he was highly ambitious and had grander designs. तो देखो, इसका मतलब क्या हुआ कि सुल्तान तो बनने ही वाला था, तो मारने की क्या जरूरत थी, राइट? तो why did he kill Jalaluddin Khilji was not because he was simply in a hurry to become Sultan. Rather, Jalaluddin Khilji's reign was seen as destructive to the very institution of the Sultan itself. So Jalaluddin was destroying the respect, power and authority of the crown, right? Alauddin did not want to inherit a weak throne. Rather, he wanted to inherit a strong throne. Therefore, he wanted to demonstrate his ability to take decisive and tough actions, so that later during his reign, people are going to fear him. People are going to respect his authority. Nobody is going to question him. Okay? So that is the real reason why he assassinated Jalaluddin Khilji. लास्ट लाइन क्या लिखा है आपने? He had grander designs. नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो. Jalaluddin's reign was increasingly being seen as a weak one. Subpoint. The authority and respect of the crown was diminishing. The authority and respect of the crown was diminishing. Next subpoint. Therefore, Alauddin did not want to inherit a weak crown. Rather, he wanted to take the crown with decisive action. With decisive action. And demonstrate his ability to take ruthless decisions, to inspire respect and fear in the future. To inspire respect and fear in the future. ठीक है, अगला मेन पॉइंट लिखो. Jalaluddin Khilji had made some serious mistakes which had eroded his authority. Number 1 and 2. Number 1, he believed that the state should function in accordance with the will of the governed. The will of the governed. तो यानी कि स्टेट को सब्जेक्ट्स की मर्जी के मुताबिक फंक्शन करना चाहिए. He believed this. सब पॉइंट सॉरी कंटिन्यू इन द सेम वन. हाँ, इसी में नंबर 1 में. This was not possible. This was not possible while excluding Hindus from the government in a Hindu majority country. In a Hindu majority country. Full stop. Therefore, Jalaluddin began including Hindus in administration. Full stop. This alienated both the orthodox nobility and the military hierarchy. Who saw it as a sign of weakness. As a sign of weakness. और नंबर 2 लिखो. Jalaluddin also adopted the policy of amnesty. Full stop. He felt that the policy of blood and iron had long-term disadvantages. And thus, it would be better to pursue peace and cooperation with rebels rather than trying to uproot them. In the same full stop, continue karo. Malik Chhajju, Chajju, a nephew of Balban, was forgiven twice by Jalaluddin. So once again, those people who doubted the ability and power of Jalaluddin, they are going to see this as a sign of weakness. Okay? So full stop. This too was seen as a sign of weakness by his doubters. By his doubters. Okay? So on the one hand, the perspective regarding the seated sultan, the sitting sultan Jalaluddin, is that he is a weak ruler, probably too soft, unable to rule properly, unable to inspire respect. His reign is going to lead to infighting, chaos, instability. On the other hand, Alauddin Khilji. Write down. On the other main point. On the other hand, comma, Alauddin Khilji began gaining the trust and support of the military and built his reputation as a strong commander. As a strong commander. Full stop. Subpoint. He was the first Sultanate commander to successfully invade south of the Vindhyas. Invade south of the Vindhyas. Full stop. He led successful campaigns in Bhilsa 1292 and Devgiri 1296. leading to large war loot, which was promptly distributed among these soldiers to secure their goodwill. ठीक है? Next main point. It was in this scenario that Alauddin assassinated Jalaluddin to declare himself as the Sultan in 1296. In 1296. Okay. Now, first of all, we have to talk about the new theory of kingship that he introduced. Then we need to talk about the different reforms introduced by him. So give the first heading, theory of kingship. Write down. Alauddin is remembered as one of the strongest sultans of Delhi. Full stop. This is also reflected in his new theory of kingship. Which was both a continuation of and a departure from Balban's theory of kingship. Its important principles are as follows. Number one, the principle of strength. क्या है ये प्रिंसिपल ऑफ स्ट्रेंथ? What is that singular quality of the sultan which makes him sultan, which gives him the crown? क्या चीज है वो? Is it the blessing of God or the support of the nobles or the right bloodline? ये सब कुछ मैटर करता है? नहीं मैटर करता है. According to Alauddin Khilji, the strongest person is always going to win, is always going to get the throne. In fact, the strongest person deserves to get the throne, because the realm, the empire is going to function most effectively under the strongest person. ठीक है? तो in the eyes of Alauddin Khilji, क्या इस तरह के डिस्कशंस कि ये असली राजा है, ये नकली राजा है, इसका रूल लेजिटिमेट है, इसका रूल लेजिटिमेट नहीं है, इनका कोई मायना है, मीनिंग है? नहीं. ऑल दीज आर मीनिंगलेस एकेडमिक स्कॉलरली डिस्कशंस. वो ये बोल रहा है कि जो क्राउन है उसको कोई जस्टिफिकेशन चाहिए ही नहीं. The crown and the king are an island unto themselves, completely isolated. They do not depend upon justification of any kind. They do not need the support of anybody else. They exist because of their power, because of the strength. The king is the king is the king. अब आप चाहे लाख बार इसके बारे में तनकीद कर लो कि वो असली किंग है, नकली किंग है, whether he is legitimate or illegitimate, that is all meaningless. ठीक है? This is the principle of strength. So write down. According to this, the only criteria for someone to become sultan is strength. Subpoint. Therefore, notions such as legitimate or illegitimate kingship are meaningless. Next subpoint. The crown is a justification in itself. Now, why do you think that he used this principle instead of the principle of some racial racial justification or some divine justification or dynastic justification? इन सब के बारे में क्यों बात नहीं किया? Because Khiljis were outsiders to the power structure. They had no legitimate claim to the throne in accordance with the established principles of dynastic succession, royal bloodline, or racial exclusivism, or divine origin of kingship. तो वहां पे अगर डिस्कशन होता तो ये हमेशा लूजिंग साइड पे आते. But since they were the strongest, this was the principle used. Idea क्या था? By doing this, Alauddin was able to justify his own rule, right? Because he was the king, because he was the strongest. लेकिन इसकी वजह से एक और चीज हुआ. क्या? That this opened the doors for anybody to aspire to become the sultan. ठीक है? Irrespective of their background, irrespective of their color, their ethnicity, anybody could now aspire to become sultan. Basis क्या है? Only strength. Now, although it was not practically possible for an ordinary person to become sultan, what it did mean was that वो जो policy of racism बलबन के time पे follow हो रहा था, वो follow नहीं होगा. Because Balban had linked the institution of kingship to Turkish racial superiority, he was also forced to promote exclusively Turks to important positions. अब क्या है? Meritocracy based हो सकता है, merit based promotions हो सकते हैं state service के लिए. ठीक है? That was one thing. यहाँ पे एक और सब point लिखो. Theoretically, it became possible for anyone to aspire to the office of Sultan irrespective of their background. Irrespective of their background. And therefore, इस principle of strength का एक corollary है, which was another principle of Alauddin's theory of kingship. That is absence of racism. Now, the Khiljis themselves were not of Turkish background, therefore it did not make any sense for them to hold on to the sense of racialism and race-dominated political calculations. अब वो क्या करेंगे? Racism is going to be replaced by meritocracy. The social base of the empire is going to be broadened. A number of new ethnicities are going to be brought within the power structure, such as Afghans, Tajiks, Persians, Uzbeks, Indian Muslims, etc. ठीक है? Write down. Since the Khiljis were themselves not a part of the exclusive Turkish nobility, comma, Alauddin did not discriminate on the basis of ethnicity, language, or ancestry. Subpoint. Promotions were done on the basis of merit. Resulting in a diverse bureaucracy and a wider social base. ठीक है? Now, the Khiljis had come to power on the basis of their military strength, and the military continued to be the most important pillar supporting the crown. This reduced their dependence upon the other sections of the population, other power brokers, such as the ulemas or the Turkish nobility. In fact, the establishment of the Khilji dynasty itself represented a major blow to the Turkish nobility, क्योंकि उन्हीं को supplant करके उनके ऊपर चढ़ गए थे Khiljis, right? And therefore, अब what kind of a policy is the Sultan going to adopt towards the nobility? A policy of cooperation or a policy of suppression? Policy of suppression. Now वो उसके ऊपर dependent है, and secondly, if he strengthens the nobility, then he is going to end up weakening himself. Therefore, despotism was a central principle of Alauddin's theory of kingship. Number 3. Despotism. Alauddin displayed a higher level of despotism than even Balban. ठीक है, अब बलबन किन चीजों के ऊपर रिलाई करता था? टू एम्फसाइज अपॉन डिस्पोटिज्म, he depended both on material as well as imagined power. ठीक है, तो material power military superiority, imagined power court rituals, pomp and show, सिजदा, पाइबोस, नौरोज etc. ये सारी चीजें, राइट? अलाउद्दीन का डिस्पोटिज्म जो था that was purely real. He depended not upon imagined power but upon real authority. His nobles feared him, were terrorized by him. He attached the property of his nobles. He suppressed various rebellious elements. He excluded and even exiled many nobles merely on the basis of suspicion of conspiracy. He persecuted many nobles. He began to tax the nobles as ordinary subjects. So nobles were marginalized by him in a drastic manner, and this was a display of despotic authority much greater than what Balban had done during his reign. Balban, while eliminating the old Turkish nobility, had promoted the new Turkish nobility. अब अलाउद्दीन क्या कर रहा है? He is going to exclude the entire nobility as a whole from the inner circle of power. Concentration of powers is going to be highest during the reign of Alauddin. ठीक है, अभी क्या लिखा है आपने लास्ट? Was higher even during the reign of Balban. Next sub point लिखो. Unlike Balban, who cultivated support from a new class of Turkish nobles, by discriminating in their favor, Alauddin effectively concentrated all power in his own hands, marginalizing the nobility in a major way. Marginalizing the nobility in a major way. Full stop. Subpoint. The nobility was stripped of its privileges, comma, marginalized from political power, comma, taxed like ordinary subjects, and even their interrelationships or even their interactions were closely monitored and regulated. अभी कैसे हुआ है आगे जब पढ़ेंगे रिफॉर्म्स को तब समझ में आएगा. ठीक है, तो ये हो गया डिस्पोटिज्म. Now, Alauddin depended on his military power. He was not dependent upon the ulemas. Therefore, he is not going to listen to the ulemas also. He is going to pursue a policy that is completely free of religious considerations. इस तरह की पॉलिसी को क्या बोलते हैं? सेक्युलर पॉलिसी. सो सेक्युलरिज्म was another important principle of his theory of kingship. Write down. Alauddin made a serious attempt to separate the state from religion. The state from religion. Full stop. Sub point. The ulemas were prohibited from interfering in political affairs. Now, what was the major function that the ulemas were performing politically? State में क्या major function perform करते थे ये लोग? उलेमा क्या करते रहे होंगे? स्टेट के लिए क्या काम करते होंगे? रेवेन्यू नहीं जनरेट कर रहे हैं. देखो, these people were learned in the scriptures. शरिया लॉ में इनकी एक्सपर्टीज थी. तो लॉ को इंटरप्रेट करना, सुल्तान कोई लीगल पॉलिसी को, पॉलिटिकल पॉलिसी को गाइड करना, दैट वेदर इट इज इन अकॉर्डेंस विद शरिया लॉ और नॉट, ये उसको एडवाइस देना, ये काम करते थे. In the reign of weak sultans, they became extremely influential. तो पूरी लीगल और पॉलिटिकल मशीनरी के ऊपर इनका बहुत ज्यादा इन्फ्लुएंस रहा करता था. अलाउद्दीन क्या करेगा? इनकी कोई बात नहीं सुनेगा. बोलेगा कि आपका काम है हाथ में लेकर के तब्जी घुमाना, वो आप काम करिए. लीव रूल टू मी, वो मेरा काम है. ठीक है, आगे लिखो. सब पॉइंट. इन पॉलिटिकल अफेयर्स, इंटरफियरिंग इन पॉलिटिकल अफेयर्स. सब पॉइंट नहीं, इसका सेक्युलरिज्म का सब पॉइंट. Alauddin began issuing secular decrees. DECREES. डिक्री का मतलब होता है रॉयल ऑर्डर. ठीक है, सेक्युलर डिक्रीज without consulting the ulemas, known as zawabits. तो ये सेक्युलर ऑर्डर्स होते थे. इनको देते समय the question of religion or sharia was not considered at all. It was done without the consultation of the ulama class. ठीक है. Now, with his policy of secularism, he had also marginalized another major power center, that is the clergy, the ulama. So in one sense, you can say that Alauddin's secularism was an extension of his despotism only, because it was designed to centralize power in his own hands rather than sharing it with anybody. Okay, write down. Sub point. In one sense, comma, Alauddin's secularism was an extension of his despotism. Extension of his despotism. Okay? Now, did his secularism also mean complete religious freedom? Were people given the freedom to pursue any religion that they wanted? Were they free to criticize Islam? नहीं, ये सब नहीं allowed होगा, ठीक है? Rather, it simply meant a separation of religion from political affairs. It did not mean granting of religious freedom to the ordinary subjects. Write down. Next subpoint. However, in this case, comma, secularism did not mean the introduction of religious equality and religious freedom. Freedom. The state continued favoring Islam as the preferred religion. As the preferred religion. So जो religion की basis पे discrimination था, that continued as earlier. उसमें कोई change नहीं होगा. ये हो गया secularism. Another important principle of his theory of kingship was imperialism. ठीक है? तो क्या है imperialism? What does it mean? क्या मतलब हुआ इसका? The tendency of empire building, territorial expansion, bringing new regions under the control of the empire. ठीक है? अब why did Alauddin incorporate imperialism in his theory of kingship? He believed that state कोई non-living static institution नहीं है, rather it is a living organism. ठीक है? And living organisms need resources in order to survive and grow. और जैसे जैसे resources consume करते जाएंगे, their size is going to continue expanding, right? And what is going to happen when expansion stops, when resource consumption stops? Stagnation followed by weakness followed by death. Okay? Therefore, the question of territorial expansion was not simply a matter of glory for Alauddin Khilji or a matter of strengthening the military organization. Rather, it was a matter of survival for the state. इस theory को क्या बोलते हैं? That state is a living, breathing organism which consumes resources. This is known as the organic theory of state. Okay? So Alauddin Khilji was a subscriber to this theory, and he believed that अगर सुल्तान position में है, so should he undertake territorial conquest or not? It is his duty, in fact, to undertake territorial expansion. In fact, Alauddin even adopted the title of Sikandar-e सानी. क्या मतलब होता है सिकंदर सानी का? सिकंदर इज Alexander. Sani means second, the second Alexander. So he was inspired by the historical figure of Alexander. He was inspired by his great military victories and conquests across Turkey and Persia. he wanted to repeat the same. So he had ambitions not only of India, conquest in India, but conquest of the entire world. Okay, write down. Alauddin believed that the state is a living, breathing organism that requires the constant supply of resources, to survive and grow. Therefore, full stop. Therefore, territorial expansion was a matter of survival. And it is the duty of a strong ruler to assimilate the resources, of a strong ruler to assimilate the resources of weaker neighboring kingdoms. Therefore, Alauddin's reign witnessed continuous conflict and territorial expansion. In fact, he adopted the title Sikandar-e-Sani, reflecting his desire for territorial conquest. Now, political expansion took place in all regions, both in North India as well as South India. So several conflicts were fought both in North as well as South India. लेकिन policy of imperialism was two-pronged. North India में दूसरा policy, South India में दूसरा policy. In North India, he followed the policy of conquest and annexation. Okay, so the defeated kingdoms were incorporated into the territory of the Delhi Sultanate and they were ruled directly. Okay. In South India, which was very far away, and since during this period the lines of communication were not very well established, they would be very difficult to manage. So यहाँ पे policy क्या था? Conquest and subjugation. So once the South Indian kingdoms were defeated, their rulers were generally restored to their thrones if they fulfilled certain conditions. क्या conditions? वही वाली conditions जो समुद्रगुप्त ने लगाई थी in South India, that you will have to give the hand of one of your daughters in marriage to the Sultan. you will have to agree to pay an annual tribute, you will have to publicly accept the overlordship of the sultan, etc. ये सारी चीजें, ठीक है. तो ये टू pronged पॉलिसी अप्रोच अप्लाई किया गया था. राइट डाउन. नेक्स्ट सब पॉइंट, अलाउद्दीन adopted a two-pronged policy of imperialism. A and B. A, in North India, he followed the policy of direct control. Annexing Gujarat, Ranthambore, Mewar, Malwa, and Jalore. Well, 99, 1301, 1303, 1305, and 1308. ठीक है. और बी लिखो, इन साउथ इंडिया the conquest was undertaken by his general. क्या नाम था जनरल का? मलिक काफूर. And indirect control was established over Devgiri, Warangal, Dwar Samudra, and Madurai. Dwar Samudra and Madurai. Thirteen 1306, 1308, 1309, 1310. Full stop. The defeated rulers, B में ही, the defeated rulers were restored upon the condition of payment of annual tribute. Full stop. Of annual tribute, upon the condition of payment of annual tribute. Next point. This transformed, इसी में ही सी नहीं लिखना है, इंपीरियलिज्म में ही ए बी हो गया है ना, तो नेक्स्ट हाँ मेन पॉइंट लिखो इसमें. This transformed the Delhi Sultanate from a North Indian principality into a pan-Indian empire. ठीक है? This is Alauddin's theory of kingship. Take down a question. Alauddin's theory of kingship infused a new spirit into the Delhi Sultanate. Full stop. How was it different from Balban's theory of kingship? तो अगर हम बोल रहे हैं कि एक न्यू स्पिरिट आया because of Alauddin's theory of kingship, so we are talking about the fresh elements in Alauddin's theory of kingship and how it resulted in some of the revolutionary aspects of the Khilji Revolution. ठीक है, तो दोनों टॉपिक्स को आपको लिंक करना होगा, खिलजी रेवोल्यूशन को विद Alauddin's theory of kingship. And second, you need to point out the differences between Balban's theory of kingship and Alauddin's theory of kingship. Now, similarities क्या हैं between Balban's theory of kingship and Alauddin's theory of kingship? Despotism and militarism. ठीक है, but differences are much more significant. Balban's theory of kingship relied upon the divine origin of kingship. Alauddin replaced this justification with the principle of strength. Balban's theory of kingship emphasized upon Turkish racial exclusivism. Alauddin replaced it with the principle of meritocracy. Balban's theory of kingship was designed to maximize despotism by suppressing the old Turkish nobility, but at the same time promoting the new Turkish nobility. However, Alauddin designed his theory of kingship to completely suppress the nobility and centralize power. So his despotism was much more effective as compared to Balban. As an expression of his despotism, and because he relied upon the principle of strength without requiring the religious sanction of the ulema class, Alauddin, unlike Balban, was in a position to pursue a policy of secularism. Further, unlike Balban, who was constrained by the needs to consolidate the empire after the disastrous reign of his predecessor Nasiruddin Mahmud Shah, Alauddin Khilji had complete freedom to pursue an aggressive policy of territorial expansion, resulting in the principle of imperialism. Okay? So these are the important differences. तो ज्यादा similarities हैं या ज्यादा differences हैं? Differences ज्यादा हैं, right? While both of them used their military as their main instrument of royal despotism and imperialism, but while Alauddin's reign could be characterized as a pure example of military despotism, Balban's reign was a mixture of racial and dynastic despotism. ठीक है? तो ये सॉरी ये बलबन का है, नॉट ये सिमिलैरिटी नहीं है. अलाउद्दीन का रेन was characterized as military despotism. Balban's reign में militarism played a very important role, but it could be better characterized as a racial and dynastic despotism. So this is one more difference. Will you be able to address this question now? ठीक है. Now coming to Alauddin's reforms. कौन सा? हाँ 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 वो भी हो जाएगा, आप कर सकते हो आप. Yes. Now Alauddin initiated wide-ranging reforms in the field of administration, military, taxation, and the market. Now let us look at them one by one. First of all, administrative reforms. Objectives क्या है in administrative reforms के? See, Alauddin wanted to maximize his despotism and imperialism. In fact, these are the two axes upon which all of his policies are going to be based. So administrative reforms के पीछे भी यही दो motivations हैं primarily. These are the motivations at the foundational level. क्या क्या? Despotism or imperialism. Whatever allows him to maximize his own control over the state, over the empire, he is going to pursue that, and whatever allows him, puts him in a better position to undertake territorial conquest and expansion, he is going to follow that. तो जो बेस लेवल पे मोटिवेशंस हैं, these are despotism and imperialism. In fact, these are not simply the objectives behind his administrative reforms, rather the entire set of reforms that he pursued, उनके objectives यही हैं. ठीक. Now, specifically, his administrative reforms were designed primarily to maximize his despotism. Alauddin was aware of the history of the Delhi Sultanate, and he knew that the biggest threat to the Sultan came not from outside but from inside the empire. क्या था उसकी पोजीशन, अथॉरिटी और पावर के लिए सबसे बड़ा खतरा? रिवोल्ट्स एंड रिबेलियंस. So prevention of rebellions was his chief priority when he brought about his administrative reforms. Ab, through a process of deep introspection as well as a process of consultation with other notable scholars, he identified 4 chief reasons for frequent rebellions. Okay? So 4 root causes were identified by him. क्या बोला कि rebellions क्यों होते हैं? First of all, can rebellions be organized with people without material resources? बिना पैसे, बिना लोगों के कभी rebellion effective होगा? नहीं होगा. So first root cause, according to him, was excessive wealth with the nobility. So nobility had gathered a lot of wealth, collected a lot of wealth, and using this wealth, they could purchase arms, they could raise an army, they could construct and rebuild forts. So this was one root cause. Second root cause was intermarriage among nobles. So when 2 noble houses enter a matrimonial alliances, they pool all their resources, right? Individually, they may not be strong or wealthy enough to challenge the authority of the Sultan, but their joint resources may be effective enough in challenging stiff opposition to the Sultan. So, अगर ये अकेले अकेले रहेंगे, will they ever dare to question the Sultan's authority? नहीं. लेकिन अगर साथ आ जाएंगे इंटरमैरिटल अलायंसेस के थ्रू, so they may dare to challenge the Sultan's rule and rebel against him. Third root cause, he assigned the blame to the Sultans themselves, that they are often negligent. They are not in a position to keep an eye on the activities of the nobles and the prospective conspirators, right? So negligence of the sultans was another factor. And lastly, चौथा रूट कॉज क्या है? शराब. The public consumption of alcohol. Now, यहाँ पे क्या लॉजिक था? Alauddin felt that when people drink alcohol and become intoxicated, they forget their place. They start having delusions of grandeur. They start comparing themselves with the Sultan and start considering him to be their equal. And thus, they develop false notions that they are as powerful as the Sultan. एंड जब शराब उतरती है तो पब्लिकली क्योंकि कंज्यूम हुआ है तो गैदरिंग में इसके बारे में बातचीत हुई है. दिस इज गोइंग टू लीड टू पॉसिबल कॉन्स्पिरेसीज बीइंग हैश्ड अगेंस्ट द सुल्तान. तो ये 4 इसके रूट कॉजेस हैं रिबेलियंस के. ठीक है, पहले इसको लिख लो. द major priorities for Alauddin's reforms were the maximization of despotism and imperialism. Next point. In the context of his administrative reforms, their chief objective was to prevent rebellions. Since Alauddin believed that rebellions were the most serious challenge to the state's health. Next point. He identified 4 root causes of frequent rebellions to a process of introspection and consultation. Full stop. इंट्रोस्पेक्शन एंड कॉन्सल्टेशन. इंट्रोस्पेक्शन का मतलब खुद से सोच करके, इंट्रोस्पेक्ट करके, और कॉन्सल्टेशन का मतलब किसी और से बात करके, कंसल्ट करके. एंड कॉन्सल्टेशन. फुल स्टॉप. दीज वर 1 2 3 4 इसको लिख सकते हो आप. नंबर 1, द कॉन्सेंट्रेशन ऑफ एक्सेसिव वेल्थ with the nobility, which allowed them to raise forces, construct forts, and challenge the Sultan. Number 2, intermarriage among nobles leading to the formation of strong matrimonial alliances that could possibly match the sultan in resources and power. That could possibly match the sultan in resources and power. Next, number 3. Negligence of the sultans who fail to detect plots and conspiracies against them. Number 4, public consumption of alcohol which gives the people the false sense of equality, with the sultan, inspiring them to have rebellious thoughts. ठीक है, अगला मेन पॉइंट लिखो. To address these root causes, Alauddin issued 4 ordinances, collectively known as his administrative reforms. ठीक है, तो ये 4 ऑर्डिनेंसेस जो हुए इनको मिला करके बोलते हैं 4 ऑर्डिनेंसेस. Each of them were designed to address one of the 4 root causes. तो पहला रूट कॉज क्या है? Concentration of excessive wealth with the nobility. Now, how to eliminate this excessive wealth? By attacking the property of the nobility. So nobility enjoyed a number of tax-free land grants such as इनाम, मिल्क, वक्फ, इदरार, etc. अब उनको abolish कर दिया गया and some of the property of the nobility was also confiscated. Write down. हाँ, last words क्या लिखे हैं आपने? Administrative reforms. Full stop. These were number 1, to confiscate all tax-free land grants and abolish all tax exemptions enjoyed by the nobility. ठीक है? What was this ordinance designed to address? The problem of द कॉन्सेंट्रेशन ऑफ एक्सेसिव वेल्थ विद द नोबिलिटी। दूसरा प्रॉब्लम क्या है? इंटरमैरिज अमंग नोबल्स लीडिंग टू द पूलिंग ऑफ रिसोर्सेज। हाउ टू प्रिवेंट दिस? नहीं। अब अगर किसी भी नोबल हाउस के बंदे को किसी और नोबल हाउस की लेडी के साथ शादी करनी है, देन दे विल हैव टू फर्स्ट अप्लाई फॉर द परमिशन ऑफ द सुल्तान। ठीक है, तो इंटरमैरिज अमंग नोबल्स वुड नाउ रिक्वायर द प्रायर परमिशन ऑफ द सुल्तान। बिना सुल्तान की परमिशन के अगर करोगे, दैट वुड बी सीन एज अ सिंबल ऑफ रिबेलियन। Actions are going to be taken against them. Write down second one, number 2. All nobles were required to seek the permission of the sultan before marriage. Before marriage. ठीक है। तीसरा प्रॉब्लम क्या है? नेग्लिजेंस ऑफ द सुल्तान। हाउ टू ओवरकम दिस? नहीं नहीं, इस सुल्तान बाकी जो भी नोबल्स हैं या फिर जो मिलिट्री कमांडर्स हैं, ही इज नॉट बीइंग एबल टू कीप टैब्स ऑन देम। जानकारी नहीं मिल पा रही है उसको कि कोई उसके अगेंस्ट कॉन्स्पिरेसी हो रहा है, कोई साजिश हो रही है, तो उसको पता नहीं लग पा रहा है। हाउ टू ओवरकम दिस? बाय रीऑर्गेनाइजिंग दी स्पाई सिस्टम। रिमेंबर, बलबन ने इंट्रोड्यूस किया था मिलिट्री इंटेलिजेंस। नाउ मिलिट्री इंटेलिजेंस कहां पे ज्यादा यूजफुल होगा? विद इन द मिलिट्री, राइट। अब सिविलियन इंटेलिजेंस भी इंटरनल इंटेलिजेंस के लिए रिक्वायर्ड था। राइट डाउन नंबर 3। द स्पाई सिस्टम was reorganized and was separated from military intelligence. Separated from military intelligence. With a large number of regular spies. Regular spies were known as Barids. And irregular spies known as Muhia. फर्क क्या है रेगुलर और इरेगुलर स्पाइस में? Regular spies were paid a regular wage by the state. They were given training by the state and they reported to superior handlers at the center. ठीक है। जो irregular spies थे मुहियाज, who were they? वो they were not part of the intelligence establishment. वो particular regions में active होते थे. They were locals who were already embedded into the local environment. तो ordinarily सर्विस प्रोवाइडर्स सच एज वॉशरमैन, मिल्कमैन, बार्बर्स, जिनका काम था घर से घर जाना ऑलमोस्ट ऑन अ डेली बेसिस, सो दे वुड बी वेरी गुड स्पाइस बिकॉज कोई सस्पेक्ट नहीं करेगा उनकी प्रेजेंस को। ठीक है, तो दो चीजें हुई कि एक तो इंटेलिजेंस डिपार्टमेंट को सिविलियन इंटेलिजेंस और मिलिट्री इंटेलिजेंस को सेपरेट कर दिया गया, एंड सेकेंड अब एक irregular, large number of irregular spies were also recruited to report directly on the activities of nobles both inside Delhi and in the provinces. ठीक है, तो तीसरा problem has been taken care of, and fourth problem, public consumption of alcohol. Solution क्या है? Ban alcohol. ठीक है, तो write down number 4. To prohibit the consumption of alcohol. right? Now, Alauddin, in order to encourage his people to give up drinking alcohol, publicly also gave it up himself. ठीक है? Write down Alauddin, सब पॉइंट लिख सकते हो. Alauddin publicly gave up alcohol in order to lead by example. In order to lead by example. In order to lead by example. ठीक है? But people were quite habituated to consumption of alcohol, so they started to ferment their own wine, started to make their own alcohol, and later on the order had to be modified. Private consumption was allowed, but public consumption was prohibited. Write down. Next point. However, when people began brewing their own liquor, the order had to be modified to allow private consumption. ठीक है? तो ये जो 4 ऑर्डिनेंसेस हैं, designed to address the problem of frequent rebellions by addressing the 4 root causes of frequent rebellions, they are known as the administrative reforms of Alauddin Khilji. इसके अलावा military reforms, revenue reforms and market reforms that we are going to do in tomorrow's class.